How would you describe your methodology with regard to blank, whether it be analysis or exploration?
You mean, sorry, when I write or when I teach?
When you, not when you teach,
Okay.
when you write or think, when you, yeah.
Okay, when I think, I hate to say it, but it's definitely the rise of matter comes to mind. I'm always interested in what's the radical root of this, of what I want to talk about. Like when I write on film noir, just to give an example. So I look at film noir and I was like, okay, I'm really interested in this. But what I'm looking at is the ultimate flowering of something. What am I looking at, and why did it form this way and not some other? And that's when I start to. Then I'm interested in the cultural context. What was going on historically in the 40s? That began to get reflected in the noir film. And then I say, okay, but Hollywood was not just making noir films; they were making musicals and so on. And in fact, I just finished an article on that where I said, did film noir really happen, or was it a setup? and what I argue is film noir is the non-genre genre. It sprang up because America had gone into a depression and a war, and the other Hollywood genres were still designed to make it seem like everything was going to work out. So there had to be a black hole in there somewhere, and noir basically became that black hole. So, way to answer your question is that's what I started writing about. How is this an anti-genre? How does it actually? It's speaking to the other genres, and it's cutting down their presumptions, and that became the article. And I talked about mortgages. Mortgages were introduced in the 1929, and people began to default almost immediately. So there was all of a sudden the debt and the sense of stress and anxiety in the noir film is illustrating some of that. And so that's kind of what I've always done. And I guess that's why modernity with the capital M is my buzzword. That's my big umbrella word. What I really, most of the time, what I mean by that term is, whatever I'm doing is happening somewhere in that context. It's more for the students sometimes, I think, and they often say, I feel like I know what modernity is, but not really. I said, no, I know, because I'm not quite sure I teach modernity. I think that's just a holding word, and then within that we look at things and we unpack them. I don't know. Does that help? Does that answer your question at all?
I think that's somewhat of an answer as far as the root method goes. Also,
Yeah.
just another throw question for another example to that. What is the Matrixial Borderspace, and how did you discover it?
Okay.
Any other person's work, or how did you? Yeah.
Right. Let me think for a minute, because I was looking at something else, and I think I was reading a piece on Lacan, whom I know well, of course, and there's Lacan and Hitchcock, and the essay said something like, of course, what Lacan calls the real, Baraka Edinger calls the Matrixial Borderspace. And Edinger disagrees with Lacan and suggests that this is the real. It's the real cannot be accessed through representation, in which she agrees with Lacan, but it can be accessed through shared affect. And Ettinger is a psychoanalyst artist, and so her book Matrixial Borderspace has a foreword by Judith Butler, and everybody's been getting really interested and really involved. And so I read her book, and it would be a hard book to read if you weren't already well versed in Lacan, because it assumes that you know all about Lacan, so that she can say, okay, here's where I want to go. So it wouldn't, if someone else came along and said, what's Garry Leonard reading? I'm just going to read it. They'd be like, what the hell is this? So part of the way I work is it is more organic than it might sometimes seem by the time the class sees it or whatever, or even by the time an editor sees it. Like it can look random from a distance, like, wow, he's reading this now, he's reading this, like, okay, fine, and he said interesting things about both, but why? And it's that organic sense of, I like Lacan a lot, but I don't think, I know his terms are both fascinating and limiting, because all terms are. And so when I read about someone else who wants to break back into the real, and because psychoanalysts use the body so much, Ettinger's, what she's saying is that the child is in the womb before it's born. So in the womb, they're not the mother and they're not the child. There's something in between. And the mother's not just the mother, she also has this child. And so there's a matrix there that is neither a border nor a space. And that, if you can use the penis in castration anxiety and the phallus, why not use the womb as a pre-representational shared space of shared affect? Because she goes on then to her idea of trauma is that the best way to, one of the ways we know that it's very hard to heal from trauma unless you can get a witness, somebody who sits there and says, I can see what you're talking about, or I can hear that that's hard. Freud knew that, Lacan knew that. What Ettinger's adding to that a little bit is that, using the transference theory too, is that what we're doing in that moment is we're sharing the affect of the trauma so that we can re-access it and bring something back into representation. And we need, Ettinger calls it witnessing, he puts an H in parentheses between wit and witnessing. So it's not just witnessing, it's witnessing with, or witnessing. And we can't do it by ourselves. And that's why this cult of, what I was saying at the end of tonight, this cult of individualism is so limiting, because we're cut off from any transsubjective shared affect. So that's more or less what it is. But that's also how I got there, was, and I suppose in general, that's why do I read new people? I read new people because I'm always reassessing the people I know, and that I am a little different that way. I know from a lot of my colleagues I know, because the other model is you become a Lacanian, let's say, and then you get better and better at understanding Lacan. But there's always this understanding that now your subject is Lacan, or your subject is Joyce, or Wolf, or and then you become an expert in your. I've always resisted that. Because it seems to me the reason I'm interested in someone like Joyce is he's uncontainable. The reason, and Lacan as well. I mean, these are minds that are expanding and inviting you to expand. And I don't want to contain them. And so people say I'm a Joycean, they say I'm a Lacanian, they say I'm all these things, and that's fine. But I know that I'm not. And I sense that in you too, actually. That you're perfectly willing to respect the integrity of a given body of thought, but you're not going to just pop inside that body and then be done. I mean, it's that learning curve thing you just mentioned. How can I at this point in my career still feel like I'm at the edge of learning new things? It's because I'm always willing to use new thinkers to reinvigorate the thinkers I know. And when you think about the great people, like Nietzsche or Heidegger, that's what they did, except they did it with philosophers. They re-inhabited Socrates or Plato, and they asked that more radical question, like, what does it mean to be? Not how should we be, but what is being? And in that one move, Heidegger had his career like being time. For Nietzsche, the God is dead thing, and some other elements, and that's why I still love what I do, and I never feel completed. There are times when I wish I could. I mean, there are times when I wish I just was one of those profs who already knew everything I was going to say and just walked in there and said it, and it's like, I'm the con expert, and I just said something, and now I'm leaving. And I can't do that, and sometimes it's a little exhausting because I'm constantly reopening the parameters of what I'm talking about, almost from course to course. Like this class, I pushed the envelope pretty hard with the group work, and the second half of the course, at least, because I don't know if it was obvious from the little bit you saw, but what I did is I gave them a Venn diagram that was blank.
Yeah, fill in your own terms, except for the Matrixial Borderspace, and use Exotica. Yeah.
Exactly, using Exotica as the subject, and so every one of those groups filled in the diagram differently. Mm-hmm. But it didn't. But it was fine because the quality of the presentations was them explaining why they used the terms they did, not getting the right terms. It's not like I had the master Venn diagram back here. I just wanted to see how they make sense of it, and it's because it's hard. It's hard to get people to. I think you heard me right, just saying to Adrian or somebody that people wind up saying, well, there's Leonard does what Leonard does, and that's great, but he's the only one who does it. Mm-hmm. He's the only one who can do it. It's not quite true, and I've been pushing that a little. Like, let me put you, and it kind of answered your earlier question. Like, let me set you up in my laboratory, kind of thing. Like, this is what I would do. I would look at Exotica, and I would say, I'm interested in Matrixial Borderspace. This is a movie where Goring goes way out of his way to show you that everybody's damaged, but collectively they have the potential to heal if they could see it. So this seems like Ettinger's. We can kind of use some of Ettinger's ideas to more fully appreciate what a Goyen has done with Exotica, and so all I really did was I set up the lab for the students. So Matrixial Borderspace is in the middle. There's the movie. I said a few things about it, and I had spoken about all these terms: commodity, fetish, and addiction, and ritual. And I said, now there you go. You have everything you need here. I don't know how you're going to put it together. Just know that you've got what you need. Talk and agree, and it was great. And the discussion board, which gave me a chance all week long. I could parachute in, and somebody would post to their fellow. And so I'm going to say the fetish is whatever. And in every instance, I was able to say, as I like to say, yes and as opposed to no but. And I kept pushing them. And I think that's one reason the presentations were much more richer than they might have been, because I was able to say, that's great. Now that you've said that, notice this, and there's another way to. I didn't challenge the terms. I was careful about that. I didn't want to say, why are you putting fetish with this and this thing? That would have gotten them all confused, and that would have made them be like, oh, damn. So he is looking for some pair. He's just not telling us, and I really wasn't. So I wound up saying, what an interesting pairing, and here's what I understand by that pairing. Like, if I try to make sense of that pairing, here's where I would go. Is that what you're doing, or is there something? Are you doing something else? And so that, I came closer than I often have been able to get the students to play around with ideas on their own and for themselves in the way that I do it. So instead of just modeling the finished thinking for them, which is where they often say, wow, that was amazing, but I could never do it, I actually took them back to the kitchen and said, here are the ingredients, here's a problem, mix it up. And I had to warn them that it's not an easy way to work, because it starts off really confusing, because you are trying to keep track of a lot of different things. And what I told them, this is what I say to myself every time I try to write something. What is at stake? Well, there's two things I say. One, I think you probably know, what I call the so what factor. And then lately, the offshoot of that, which is similar but a little different, is what is at stake. So why does this matter? Certainly. But also, given that it matters, how can you set it up so that we see why it matters and we see how it matters? Because that gives then you can take it beyond the actual thing you're working on. Like you can write about exotica, obviously. But I could tell this group, they're gonna, next time they see an ad for this or that, next time they see another movie, this is gonna come back to them. I mean, everything they did here tonight is transportable. So they won't leave saying, I know, okay, I have exotica down cold, but that's all I've got. That's not all they got at all. They have something much more resonant than that. And it may take them a while to figure it out or to believe it, but this is one of those experiments where I'll have to wait, see what students tell me in the next couple of classes, like whether there's something, how this worked, or whether it came back to them. But yeah, so that's my spiel. I remember last time we spoke. Are you trying to do an actual project, or you're put together a conference or something?
I was gonna put together a conference, but then I decided just to break it down logistically and just interview people on the question of value. And I've been pretty busy as always. And I've been doing that more so informally than formally in a lot of ways. So I just start recording a lot of my conversations now and seeing where that goes, so I can reconnect some dots basically, and then write some articles. Yes. And once I have the articles out there, I can start to get a more physical framework in our world.
Yeah. So, value. Tell me how value is folding into when you ask people how do they work and how do you do this. Why this, and how did you get over there? How does the value show itself? I mean, I think I know, but...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are... Well, I can give you examples. I hope the examples don't limit you, but I'll give you them anyway.
Yeah.
First of all, the first way people demonstrate value is the ways that you're already incredibly familiar with. Commodification, modernization, progress, the Pepsi, whatever else. And then I get the more interesting answers, not only in psychology, by sort of talking about different takes on the Pepsi myth, like sort of a weird kind of productivity that allows us to look at ourselves as society and saying not just that we're moving forward, but that we have a new criteria, a new scientific criteria with which we can bring a smaller needle, a sharper dot to carve out our reality, to draw the line.
I see, yes.
And then there's one of my favorites is the one I got from talking to a philosophy professor, one of my favorite, Jessica Wilson. And what's the value of being a philosopher? It's something I'm sure you're familiar with. It's the factor that makes one never intellectually intimidated. It's literally saying I'm willing to step into any chemistry lab, any workspace. I'm willing to question any discourse, because we're moving towards a society that is using science and things. And if we've seen any downfalls of science, it's been dogma and basically assumptions we didn't see there automatically, whether it's scientific racism or whether it's just plain ignorance of some factors or cultures. And being the philosopher there, to at first build the arguments, to at first build the rational, which is a nice conversation between Steven Pinker and a girl he went out with. I can't remember her name, but basically they're talking about, she was arguing for reason, as basically reason is the thing. It's the good. It's what drives moral progress, basically. And Steven Pinker is playing the reverse. He's saying, oh, it's just emotions, it's just psychology. I've been doing psychology for years. I look at how words affect people's brains, and just the fact that behavior and determinism are already there in our society. But she argues very strongly that pretty much any argument, even like we're doing now, is based on reason. And it starts in the workshop, in the laboratory of that crazy philosopher who is called crazy at the start. But that's kind of the crazy that you need to run a scientific society.
Sometimes they even go crazy, like so we know they live in
madhouse for the last 10 years.
I'd like to know more about that. Actually, this is exactly how crazy he was. Although, there are sometimes these intellects collapse in funny, in strange ways, and people can't make sense of it. They're right after that. But I don't know, the whole See, that's why I like Matrixial Borderspace a little bit as a modality, not as a truth, but as yet another interesting paradigm, because it's I like this new idea. You know, she talks about attunement, and she wants to talk about things like antenna, and what she's really trying to say is that there's meaning beyond meaning, which is because usually what you get with the reason argument as well is even the surrealists they would say there's something beyond meaning, but they wouldn't say it was meaningful, and in a funny way, Ettinger's really struggling with this, obviously, but she's trying to say that what's in the real is beyond representation. It's beyond the symbolic, but it's not meaningless. And Lacan would say, no, it's not meaningless, but it's only meaningful to the degree that it influences how we generate meaning. So he sends you back into the symbolic. And she's trying to say, it has its own integrity. Which Lacan almost said, and who knows where Lacan would have gone if he lived another 20 years, but he died when he was 80 or something. But, great thinkers died, right? I mean, so that they probably would have done more. Mm-hmm. They couldn't. They ran out of time. And that's the other reason I get impatient when people wind up saying, well, you're really going beyond what Lacan did. And I said, yeah, I know, but, he's dead. I mean, someone has to do it for him. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'd be horrified at what I'm doing, but why not? I mean, if someone finds the Pepsi myths a useful platform to jump off to something else when I'm not around anymore, then great. To me, that's part of the intellectual community. You hand off the baton a bit. I don't want to say to some thinkers do this, and it's unfortunate. They get dogmatic, and they're like, if you're going to represent my thought, you got to represent my thought. And I'm not like that, and not all thinkers are, but I'm much more like, I'm always trying to generate not only ideas for me, but also generate them in a way that it's generative for others. I like to lose control of my argument in a way, and sometimes I hear what people are doing with my ideas, and there's nothing that I would do, but I don't mind. Sometimes they don't even say the word right, or they've mispronounced the word, and they got an entire theory now based on a mispronunciation. And as long as they're enthusiastic about it, and they seem to be getting somewhere, it wouldn't even be accurate to say, by the way, you mispronounced the word. It's actually this, which means it's that. Which I don't even think that would be accurate, because Joyce says something great. He says the man of genius makes no mistakes. His errors are the portals of his discoveries. And I think there's something to that. Errors, why can't errors be the foundation of, they probably are, right? Scientists, not that this is the greatest thing ever, but the Viagra was supposed to be a heart medication. They made a mistake. Wound up with something else. Now they're marketing happily. But so I might even go so far as to say that all genuine breakthroughs almost have to begin with error. Error understood as fortunately misunderstanding the paradigm in such a way that you were thrown out of it, that it just fell apart on you, and suddenly and you panicked and maybe even tried to get back inside the paradigm. It was too late. It was almost like you snuck out into the universe and someone locked the door behind you. And now you're like, damn. I always liked that, the Watson and Crick thing with the DNA, that until they thought of a spiral staircase, they could not imagine how DNA could possibly work. They didn't have the double helix. I think I think it's possible that DNA looks nothing like a double helix. But if it doesn't, we'll still be able to see why thinking it looked like a double helix allowed us to understand so much about it. It won't be a matter of, maybe this is what Jessica Wilson would get at too. It's like, I don't think it matters what a DNA looks like. if you just, if what you say it looks like allows you to build a genome, then obviously you've done something really interesting. It doesn't matter whether that's what it's going to look like in the end. But by the same token, and that gets into the argument about reason, if you break a paradigm like atomic splitting the atom, say nuclear bomb versus nuclear energy, the problem with breaking open paradigms is I just said I don't mind losing control of my argument, and I don't, but I think Einstein regretted it. He did not connect these dots so people could drop a bomb on Hiroshima, but there's a direct connection, and he was sorry about that, and you know, he was pretty clear that, and this is where I might argue with your friend a little bit, is reason can break open paradigms where we do not have the moral sophistication yet to make good decisions. And so terrible irrational things will happen. And I think that's why pop culture invented the mad scientist, that Dr. Jekyll and Hyde and all the rest of them, they're trying to say our technical know-how is outstripping our moral sensibilities. Because I don't think moral sensibility is strictly reasonable.
Oh no, it's not.
Because compassion and empathy, all these transsubjective feelings, reason is not very. I mean, it can be duplicated, but only by taking the form that it already had. And I'm not against reason. It's at best half the story.
I think the idea is more so the reason is the map with the borders on it, and sort of emotion and behavior modification and affect and everything are the actual fighters in the war.
Yes.
To throw another one of our metaphors in.
Yeah, that's okay. I like that actually, but I don't think that means. But the borders are, like one of the students tonight said something I liked. It did something about how the dark lines in the Venn diagram are actually the space, and
we're not talking about those.
We're not talking about those. Yeah, you can't. I mean, that's the problem. Once you draw your circle, you stop talking about the circle and start talking about what the circle allows you to talk about. Always remembering that it's only because you do the circle that you're talking about. And you could erase the circle or draw a different one. That's cool. Your project sounds fun. See,
I like it.
You may, in my terms, you may be doing something kind of transsubjective because you're talking to different thinkers, and you're letting you're inviting the thinkers to explain their platform as you have me, and then you're going to be the one left to see connections that are not contained in any one thinker's. So in a sense that if you're a director of a movie here, you get to see what each of the characters see, and then you get to do parallel editing or say, okay, here's where Leonard and Wilson came together, but not in a way they would necessarily recognize or agree upon, or all of which to say I'm interested in your project, so let me know how it's going as you take it to the next level.